You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's headlines. Parliament convenes for the first time in over a year to approve financial draft laws. Kataib supporters rallied to demand the election of a new head of state as the party's lawmakers boycott the Parliament session, deeming it unconstitutional and illegal. And Kurdish Iraqi fighters backed by US-led coalition warplanes launched a major offensive to retake the strategic town of Sinjar in northern Iraq from ISIL fighters. Parliament has convened for the first time in more than a year to approve financial draft laws after a last-chance compromise averted a boycott by two major Christian parties. However, Kataib Party leader Sami Jmail walked out of the session soon after it began, in line with his announced boycott of the meeting. Lebanon's major Christian groups have criticized Speaker Nabih Berri for excluding an electoral law from the session's agenda, but a last-minute agreement was reached on Wednesday after a flurry of contacts that involved Berri, Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja, Free Patriotic Movement chief Michel Aoun, and former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, amongst other figures. Hariri said his future movement would attend today's session to pass what some deem to be urgent financial draft laws related to Lebanon's financial and economic interest and its relationship with the international community. Health Minister Wael Abu Faoud has announced that Parliament has approved the food safety law during today's legislative session. The minister noted that the law will turn the page on an era during which the health of citizens had hinged on the enthusiasm of any minister or any ministry regarding issues related to food safety. Under Abu Faoud, the Ministry of Health has launched an unprecedented food safety campaign that has involved the closure of numerous restaurants and institutions and the issuance of ultimatums to many violating businesses. The campaign has also tackled medicines, hospitals and beauty centers across Lebanon. Earlier on, Kataib supporters had rallied to demand the election of a new head of state before the party's lawmakers withdrew from the session, which they deemed unconstitutional and illegal given the ongoing presidential vacuum. Demonstrators began marching from the party's headquarters in Beirut Saifi area toward Parliament and reached the outer premises of the Nejmi Square, causing major traffic in the area. Kataib leader Sami Jmail said MPs have no right to do anything except elect a president, and vowed his party will not participate or accept any compromise to hold a legislative session amid a presidential vacuum. Lawmakers have failed to elect a new president in 31 sessions, mostly due to a boycott by March 8 lawmakers, but Jmail vowed his party will escalate its actions in the upcoming days. The Lebanese army has dismantled an explosive device in Tripoli, north of Lebanon. A security source said the 10-kilogram explosive device was discovered in Tripoli's so-called American neighborhood near Jabal Mohsen early this morning. Soldiers sealed off the perimeter after a suspicious box was found near Canaan Cafe. Military experts were quickly called in after two paint pails were found inside the carton with several detonators and wires attached to a battery. The bomb disposal unit safely detonated the bomb and took it to a nearby military barracks where an investigation was launched. Also in Tripoli, police arrested a suspicious man wearing an explosive belt in the Kibbe neighborhood overnight. The army has also detained a Lebanese national suspected of being behind the explosion that targeted a military patrol last week in northeast Lebanon. A security source says Muhammad Ahmad al-Hujairi was arrested in the border village of Arsal. The 33-year-old suspect reportedly opened fire at the army unit, raiding a location where he was present in the Sabil neighborhood, prompting soldiers to respond. Syrian regime troops backed by Lebanon's Hezbollah took control of the key rebel-held town of Al-Hadir, south of Aleppo city. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says fighting was ongoing, adding that both Syrian and Russian warplanes were carrying out strikes in the area. The observatory says the town is the biggest headquarters for rebel forces in southern Aleppo, and capturing it would bring the army closer to the key Aleppo-Damascus highway. The capture of Al-Hadir comes after regime forces entered the Qairis military base in eastern Aleppo province, which has been under an ISIS siege for over a year. Kurdish Iraqi fighters backed by U.S.-led coalition warplanes have launched a major offensive to retake the strategic town of Sinjar in northern Iraq from ISIL fighters. A statement from the Kurdish Regional Security Council said about 7,500 Peshmerga fighters were closing in on the mountain towns from 3 fronts in an effort to cut off ISIL supply lines. This comes as U.S.-led coalition warplanes bombed ISIL positions in the region last night out of what Kurdish officials called Operation Free Sinjar. And still in the region, an elite Israeli military force that operates undercover has stormed the Al Ahli hospital in Hebron and shot dead a 27-year-old Palestinian. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said Abdullah al-Shalaldi was killed by 5 rounds of shots fired early today after 21 members of the elite unit, known as al-Mustarabin, barged into the hospital room of his cousin, Azam al-Shalaldi. The commandos wanted to question Azam, who required surgery after earlier being shot by Israeli security forces, but his cousin tried to prevent them from doing so when the Israelis opened fire. Following the killing of Abdullah, the Israeli force arrested Azam, who was recovering at the hospital. The Swedish government imposes stricter border controls to deal with the unprecedented arrival of refugees. That's coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast. Gunmen have killed 8 civilians, including a child, in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, where the army is battling a militant insurgency. Security officials said unidentified armed men shot and killed 7 men and a 4-year-old child in their home in El Arish in northern Sinai last night. The victims, who were from the town of Rafah on the border with the Gaza Strip, had reportedly been killed for cooperating with the security forces. Egypt's affiliate of the extremist group ISIS has previously claimed to have executed several Sinai inhabitants that is accused of being informants of the security forces. Police in Greece have fired tear gas to disperse anti-austerity demonstrators after clashes broke out in the capital. Nearly 25,000 people took to the streets in 3 separate demonstrations in central Athens. Youths broke away from one protest march, throwing Molotov cocktails at police, who responded with tear gas and stun grenades. There's no immediate reports of injuries or arrests. This was the first general strike since the country's left-led government initially came to power in January. Public services were shut down across the country as workers protested a new round of bailout-related tax hikes and spending cuts. And still in Europe, the Swedish government has imposed stricter border controls to deal with the unprecedented arrival of refugees streaming across its borders. The Nordic nation that touts itself as a humanitarian superpower that welcomed more asylum-seeking refugees per capita than any other EU country, and authorities forecast up to 190,000 people could arrive this year. The move came as European and African leaders met at a summit on the refugee crisis in Valletta on the island of Malta. EU leaders have agreed to provide their African counterparts more than $2.2 billion in emergency funds for economic development and to help curb chaotic migration across the Mediterranean. More than 700,000 people have reached Europe via the Mediterranean Sea this year, and Sweden has been one of the most generous countries in accepting desperate refugees fleeing war in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and several African countries.
Because we need to keep control over our borders. That's very important. So it's border control exactly according to the rules that we are adhering to the rules that we have in Europe. We can do this because when our authorities tells us we cannot guarantee the security and control over our borders, we need to listen to that. We're all in a difficult situation. Sweden has received so many refugees, far more than any other countries per capita counted. This is not a fence. We need to make sure that we have control over what people comes into Sweden, because it's a matter of both the border control, but also that you have to identify yourself on the ferry before you enter the ferry. This is not an issue for 1 or 2 or 3 countries. This is an issue for the whole European Union. We need to manage this together.
Moving on to Africa, the UN Security Council has scheduled a vote on a resolution condemning increasing killings, torture, and other human rights violations in Burundi, and threatening possible sanctions against those contributing to the violence. At least 240 people have been killed since President Pierre Nkurunziza launched a controversial bid to prolong his term in office in April. More than 210,000 people have fled the country since then. French diplomats said they expected unanimous support for the draft resolution from the 15-member council, which is set to convene this evening. And in Asia, Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi has received more congratulations and pledges of support from Myanmar's military rulers as her opposition party awaited official results confirming an expected landslide win in historic elections. The National League for Democracy has captured nearly 90% of the seats announced for both houses of parliament and is only 38 seats away from an outright majority government. More details in this report.
The National League for Democracy's supporters in fine voice. The party, founded in 1988 and led by Aung San Suu Kyi, could be on the cusp of its finest hour as it prepares for government in Myanmar. Tet Tet Kine represents a new generation of MPs, a businesswoman who studied abroad. She joined the NLD as part of a campaign to bring fresh blood to the party ranks.
If the qualification, the experience, the background are the same, the young people are preferred, and women are preferred, and ethnic people from the ethnic groups are preferred, so that we have very diverse group of the candidates.
The party built its electoral campaign around Aung San Suu Kyi. For millions of Myanmar citizens, she's the focus of their desire for a definitive break with decades of military rule.
I'm sure that Mother Suu will be able to form a new government, and also the President has announced that he will accept the result of the election.
But the NLD will need the cooperation of the army, who automatically hold 25% of parliamentary seats. They also retain control over the key ministries of defence, interior and borders. For a party that has only ever known opposition, it could be a delicate balancing act.
The handover from the current administration to the next will be quite tricky, but not impossible. It's about ensuring that there is continuity. It's about ensuring that institutional memory is maintained. There will be a period of learning, I think.
Despite the challenges, including grappling with the country's poor infrastructure and deep ethnic tensions, Suu Kyi is confident of the NLD's capacity to govern.
I think looking at the governments that have gone before us, we should be in a position to form a better government.
With expectation and desire for change sky high, both at home and abroad, Suu Kyi has already called on her supporters to be patient.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. Parliament convenes for the first time in over a year to approve financial draft laws, amongst others. Kataeb supporters rallied to demand the election of a new head of state as the party's lawmakers boycott the parliament session, deeming it unconstitutional and illegal. And Kurdish Iraqi fighters backed by US-led coalition warplanes launched a major offensive to retake the strategic town of Sinjar in northern Iraq from ISIL fighters. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim, and I thank you all for tuning in this afternoon. Thank you.